New updates in the Sean Diddy Combs legal saga. The rap mogul gets an official sentencing date. He gets hit with allegations from a shocking new lawsuit. A juror speaks out, and also, apparently, Diddy receives a standing ovation from inmates.
Diddy exploded in court as the judge handed down a staggering prison sentence after a bombshell trial verdict. The courtroom was suffocating with tension, so heavy it felt like the air itself might shatter. A chilling silence swept the room. You could hear the faintest breath, the smallest shuffle. All eyes were transfixed on the bench, bracing for the words that would change everything forever.
In the Sean Diddy Combs trial, but I'll tell you what, this case, not over. No. Important hearing today, sort of. We got to talk about why. Well, Judge Arun Subramanian had sent a tentative October 3rd sentencing date for Diddy on his convictions of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Remember, that's what he was convicted of. He was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy, and he was acquitted of the 2 sex trafficking counts. But he was convicted of these prostitution charges. And at one point, there was reporting that defense counsel for Sean Combs and prosecutors, they had then agreed to switch the date to September 22nd. And we thought, okay, because today's hearing was supposed to be about expediting the October hearing. Then they agreed to September 22nd. Now apparently it's back to October 3rd. This is all over the place. Very confusing. We'll get it straightened out. I gotta say it's interesting because Combs' defense counsel had originally stated last week, when it was the October 3rd date, that they wanted that sentencing expedited, meaning they wanted it to happen sooner. And one of the things that Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had said was, quote, the mother of some of his children had passed away many years ago. These kids, the 2 daughters here sitting in the middle of Your Honor's second row, don't have a parent. Obviously referring to the death of Kim Porter in 2018, mother of Christian, Jesse, Delilah, Quincy. And by the way, remember Sean Combs was denied bail, so it wasn't even like he got to go home after the verdict, but clearly they wanted this expedited. They want his sentencing to happen as quickly as possible. They want him out of jail. They want him out of prison as soon as possible. And also it's interesting because prosecutors, they need time for the pre-sentencing investigation and report. Basically, that's when a probation officer interviews the defendant, looks at the history, the background, childhood, education, employment, criminal history, finances, the mental and physical health of the defendant. There are interviews that are conducted with family and friends. The officer looks at various court and school records, employment records, financial records. The officer could speak to the victims in the case, law enforcement that were involved in the investigation, provide all of this information in a report to the judge, because here the judge is going to have a lot of discretion when it comes to the sentence. What could a sentence look like? Well, prosecutors indicated in a filing that before even doing a pre-sentencing investigation, Combs is looking at 51 to 63 months, a little over 4 to 5 years in prison. The defense seems to be pushing for 21 to 27 months, so a little over 1.5 to 2 years. But remember, Combs has been sitting in federal lockup since September at the MDC. So if he gets time served, he really wouldn't be spending that much time behind bars. Now, of course, they're the extremes. When you talk about transportation to engage in prostitution, the maximum for each count is 10 years in prison. You stack them together, you get 20 years. Okay, based upon the facts in this case, it seems highly unlikely he would get that much. Other side, you get the idea. There's no minimum for this charge. So could he get time served and walk free? Also seems unlikely, in that you're dealing with multiple instances of transporting Jane and Cassie, the 2 victims in this case, and men across state lines for the purposes of sex work. You could say this is an aggravating factor why I don't think he's just going to get time served.
The man who now held Diddy's future in his
The man who now controlled Diddy's entire fate sat towering behind the bench, his expression unreadable. After weeks of scandal, explosive testimony, and the most sensational trial the entertainment world had ever seen, the moment had finally come. And when the gavel came down, it cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot felt around the world. Diddy was sentenced to prison, live, unfiltered, no cameras, no edits. And in that moment, the music mogul, the businessman, the icon, completely came apart. This was not the confident, untouchable Diddy the world had grown used to. This was not the man who once ruled the charts, filled arenas, and threw legendary parties. This was a man crushed beneath the weight of justice. The verdict had shaken him, but the sentence, that was the dagger. Eyewitnesses inside the courtroom said Diddy's expression collapsed the moment the judge began to speak. His lawyers had been holding out for a miracle: probation, house arrest, maybe even a suspended sentence. But the judge's tone left no room for hope. There would be no mercy. "This court cannot and will not ignore the pattern of behavior we have witnessed," the judge said, voice cutting through the silence like steel. "This isn't about one night. This isn't about one mistake."
You might be saying, Jesse, wait a second, he was denied bail at every turn. And you would be right, he was. Despite proposing extensive bail conditions during the course of this legal saga, including a $50 million bail package and monitoring by private security personnel, the court was not convinced. Now, by law, the defense has the burden to prove that Combs is not a flight risk or danger to the community. And given the charges, the allegations, including that he was improperly trying to contact people in the case pre-trial, he was always denied release. But then there's what happened after the verdict last week. And this is an interesting conversation. And again, we're going to be speaking with Ira Judelson in a minute, who's been working with Diddy's team on possibly getting him released. But after the verdict, the defense applied for Combs to be released from detention pending sentencing. But that request was again denied by Judge Arun Subramanian. The defense argued, look, he's no longer charged with RICO, there's no longer presumption of detention, we have his passport, there's no access to private planes, there's no criminal history, this is his first conviction, he would be a fool to mess any of this up because he was just given his life back by the jury, he wasn't convicted of the highest charges, he was facing up to life in prison, now he's not. He should be allowed to return to his property, his mansion in Florida. There'll be a $1 million bond. Now, the government argued, look, Sean Combs, he was convicted of serious charges, Mann Act violations. There was physical abuse in this case. There was prolific use and distribution of drugs. He committed crimes while under investigation, including having drugs in his hotel room when he planned to surrender to federal authorities back in September of 2024. And Judge Arun Subramanian denied the bail application, sided with the government, that these convictions on these charges, by law, they trigger the mandatory detention statute, that the defense conceded Combs is violent. They conceded that at trial. Quote, "We own the domestic violence." That's what the defense had said. The judge also made the point that it was impossible for the defense to demonstrate that he poses no danger, particularly given his violence after the searches of his properties and when he knew he was under investigation. That's the whole Violent Jane episode, attacking Jane, one of the victims in this case. And also that the evidence at trial showed there was a years-long pattern of abuse and violence. But despite the judge denying Combs' release once again, and given that his sentencing has officially been confirmed for October 3rd, that was agreed by both the defense and the prosecution yesterday, could he get out beforehand? It's an interesting question. Let me bring in right now a special guest. I am joined by one of the most renowned bail bondsmen, probably in the country, definitely in New York, Ira Judelson. Ira, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar, and pleasure to meet you.
You too, Jess. Pleasure myself.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do. Talk about what you do. I don't know if everybody completely understands the process and your role in it.
You know, it's funny. Not a lot of people understand the world of bail. They think that a bondsman just raises his hand and you know, that's where it ends. With me, it starts with the people that you meet, the lawyers, the judges, the DAs, hearing about a bail, putting it together, which could take days, weeks, as in this case that we're talking about right now, Puffy. I started on this case going back almost 7 months ago when they brought me in as a consultant, because federal bail and state bail are two different things. State bail was most of the bails that I write. Federal bail, they don't need a bondsman. They do go through pretrial services. But a lot of times major attorneys will bring me in to consult because they'll be denied and they'll say, hey, what do we do? So in this case with Puffy, I got brought in and we talked about possibly renting out his plane and keeping it in Honolulu.
"This is about years of misconduct," the judge said, his voice reverberating through the courtroom like a hammer blow. "Years of fear, of silence bought with money, and a blatant disregard for accountability." And then it came. The sentence. Over. A decade behind bars. A collective gasp swept the room. Diddy buried his face in his hands as his legal team sat frozen, struggling to process the words. Just feet away, his family broke down in tears. But it was Diddy's reaction that seared itself into memory. He stood trembling, before collapsing back into his chair, completely undone. The once untouchable mogul had finally met a wall he could not buy his way through. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. Reporters scrambled for statements. Protesters crowded the steps. Supporters wept while detractors cheered. And the music. Industry? It was silent, holding its breath. Cent, who had dogged Diddy since day one, didn't hesitate. Within minutes, he posted online, "The empire's down, and this is only the beginning." The post detonated across the internet, liked, shared, and dissected by thousands in mere minutes. His words weren't just gossip. They captured a truth the world could no longer ignore. This trial was never just about Diddy. It was about an entire culture that had turned a blind eye for far too long.
Denied at the very beginning of the case, one after another after another. This judge, and it's the same judge who's going to sentence him, denied that over and over again. And you and I, again, in another conversation we had on your show, we both said he is screwed now, that he's got no chance because he's violating the rules of the court while in jail. So if he's disobeying the rules of the jail and the directive of the court while he's in custody, how can he be expected to actually follow the terms of a bail agreement when he's out of custody?
Right, right.
And I think that chicken is coming home to roost again. I mean, I think that's what happened yesterday afternoon. That any judge who has a criminal defendant who behaves like that, that is an affront to the court itself. It's disrespectful to the court. And it's almost like he couldn't get out of his own way there at the beginning. But he had an excellent defense team.
He does. So assuming for a moment, whenever the sentencing hearing happens, right? Let's say it happens in a month from now. Let's say it has October 3rd. The question is, what's his sentence? As we mentioned, the prosecution in a filing from yesterday talked about the guidelines range being 51 to 63 months. Now, this is before a pre-sentencing investigation and report. Now, the defense, right, they want 21 months. He's already served almost 10. Talk to us about what you're thinking here, because there is no minimum. The maximum's 10. If the judge were to combine it together, like you said, 20 years, feels highly unlikely that would happen. As we're talking, what is a pre-sentencing report investigation? How would it affect this? What do you think the judge is going to do? There's so many different factors to consider here, and it's not like a murder case when it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. It's like life in prison without the possibility of parole. It's a given. There's room here. What do you think the judge is going to do?
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court. The probation department can make a recommendation, but the DA will certainly have more ability, most of the time, to talk a judge in or out of a sentencing recommendation from the probation department. Federal court is different. They really put a lot of weight on those. So that's something that I think is going to be very interesting. And a lot of that will come down to what the individuals involved in that investigation, even though it shouldn't impact their professional recommendation. It's really, I think we're going to see what they thought of the case. Did they think he got away with something horrific here? Did they think that he was getting railroaded from the beginning? I think that may reflect in the recommendation to the court. But of course, we don't know what that is yet. I don't know. If I'm his defense lawyer, I'm kind of I don't know if I am pressing the gas on that, trying to make this thing go faster. I mean, it's coming up soon enough anyway. I would want to give them the time and not press them, because you don't want a probation officer or anybody in the federal system to feel like they're being rushed.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to just go, okay,
Yeah.
screw it, the guy should stay in.
The prosecution made the
those
point
guys just
yesterday.
made.
They said the point, like, we're not ready to give a really sentencing recommendation. We haven't gotten the report. There's people say, well, maybe he'll get time served, right? He's been locked up. There's other people say, no, the judge is going to throw the book at him. Even though the judge said yesterday, even though I'm denying him bail and I'm looking at certain conditions, this is not reflective or a preview of what my sentencing recommendation or what my sentence will be. But, are we looking at double digits? Are we looking, you think, at 1 to 5 years, time served? I know it's so impossible to ask, but it is a very specific charges he was convicted of.
Yeah, we're not looking at double digits.
Okay.
I cannot imagine the court imposing that. And remember, because this law is so old, and we're in an age of Uber.
As the dust settled, the full scope of what had unfolded became clear, and it was devastating. The prosecution hadn't simply built a case on accusations. They had built it on a lifestyle. One defined by power, privilege, and the silencing of voices, and the judge made it crystal clear that lifestyle had reached its end. Diddy's defense fought relentlessly. They pointed to his philanthropy, his groundbreaking business ventures, his role in uplifting Black culture and opening doors for countless artists. But none of it mattered. The mountain of allegations and evidence overshadowed any legacy he had built. The court was unmoved. The verdict and sentencing sent shockwaves through Hollywood, the music industry, and beyond. You can be rich, you can be famous, you can have powerful friends. But when the truth finally breaks through, it will tear everything down. As Diddy was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, cameras captured an image that would haunt the world. No sunglasses, no entourage, just a broken man walking toward a future he could no longer control. Behind him, the walls of his empire began to collapse. Brands cut ties. Business partners vanished. His music, once a fixture on every playlist, was quietly scrubbed from rotations. The silence was deafening. Artists tied to his labels and legacy projects began severing their connections, some even pursuing legal action to remove their names from his brand altogether. And as those walls kept falling, the ripple effects only grew stronger. This trial, this verdict, this sentence, they had opened the floodgates. New allegations were already surfacing. More lawsuits were being filed. More names whispered. Diddy's case may have dominated the headlines, but it was only the beginning. The culture was shifting, and the silence that had protected the powerful for decades was finally being shattered. The message was unmistakable. No one is above the law. Inside prison, Diddy's new reality was harsh. The private jets, sprawling mansions, and curated image were gone. In their place, steel bars, concrete walls, and stripped-down routines. Sources close to the situation revealed he was struggling emotionally, mentally, and physically. The man, who once commanded empires, was now just another inmate, a number adjusting to life in confinement. Outside, the industry was being forced to confront its reflection. Investigative journalists were combing through Diddy's past, and what they were uncovering was darker than anyone had imagined. One chilling revelation emerged from insiders. Many of Diddy's lavish properties had allegedly been outfitted with hidden cameras and advanced recording devices. These weren't just for security. According to sources, they were used to collect leverage. Guests, associates, even romantic partners had reportedly been recorded without their knowledge. If true, it opened an entirely new layer of legal peril. Federal agencies were reportedly coordinating with local authorities to pursue additional charges. And the leaks kept coming. Former assistants, managers, and collaborators, once bound by fear and airtight NDAs, were beginning to speak out. They described a culture of manipulation and intimidation that had kept the truth buried for years. But with Diddy convicted and sentenced, that fear was starting to erode. The revelations were damning, and they were far from over. Social media exploded. Fans divided, the industry uneasy, and the public demanding accountability. This was no longer just about Diddy. It was about every powerful figure who believed their money, fame, and connections could shield them forever. The rules had changed. More names would fall. More victims would finally be heard. The era of unchecked power was ending, and the reckoning had only just begun. Diddy's sentence wasn't just a punishment. It was a warning shot to an entire system. This is the start of a cultural revolution, and the fallout? It's only just beginning.